Again, to echo Dan, appreciate all of you that are taking the time out of your day to be with us, and hopefully you'll consider it time well spent. Today's topic is primarily how to get better at assessing ROI on your go-to-market investments. We'll start by discussing why that's important, although it should be somewhat obvious, and why it's actually hard to leverage traditional finance infrastructure like the chart of accounts to accomplish that. And we'll also kind of show the impact that comes from answering the wrong questions when you should actually answer the questions about ROI. And then we'll introduce two tools, activity-based costing and full funnel analytics, which together combine to provide a way to get sufficient clarity around go-to-market ROI. So for most growth stage and mid-market B2B companies, go-to-market spend represents the single largest category of OpEx. And in the world of recurring revenue, this includes marketing, sales, and customer success functions. Growth stage and mid-market tech companies are notoriously inefficient with their go-to-market spend. And as the evidence shows in this chart, they're getting worse. What we're looking at on this chart is effectively the ratio of sales and marketing costs divided by net new ARR. This is for public companies, but the trend is very similar for private companies, and it's just been going up and up over the last couple of years. So why is that, right? Why is it so inefficient? Well, certainly some of it has to do with macro conditions, right? There's more buyer scrutiny now during the purchase process. There's lower barriers, so a lot more competition. But even back when things were easier, these companies traditionally had a ton of non-productive, let's call it wasted spend across their go-to-market functions. Here at Scale Matters, we spend a lot of time working with many VC and PE investors, and they constantly tell us that their portcos are wasted, 20 to 50% or more of their go-to-market spend is just completely non-productive. And this wasted spend is primarily driven by two things. One, lack of alignment between the marketing, sales, and CS functions. So their activities and their investments are not really synchronized. And in many cases, they actually are working cross-purpose. But the other reason there's so much wasted spend is because most of these companies are not very good at being able to really understand the relative ROI of the investments they're making in go-to-market. And as a result, they aren't really outfitted to make any good decisions on how to improve that. So this waste and inefficiency was often tolerated back in the day of growth at all costs. But unless you're an AI pure play, I'd say that world is long gone. Liquidity is dried up, and with minimal exits and associated distributions, it's really hard for many investors to raise new funds. Efficient growth is today's mandate, and companies that fail to achieve that are going to struggle to maintain any kind of decent valuation, and in many cases will likely struggle to survive. And you can't achieve efficient growth by simply cutting expenses across the board, which is what so many companies have tried to do. That's just a blunt instrument, right? And in many cases, when we do that, we actually start to impair growth. So you have to understand which of your investments are working and which are not, so that you can reallocate your spend, particularly focused on go-to-market right now, to the areas that are productive and take money away from the areas that aren't productive or that are ineffective. No different than any good portfolio manager would do. But if we go to the next slide, most companies aren't actually set up to do good portfolio management across their go-to-market investments because they don't really have the infrastructure set up properly to capture ROI. What you're looking at here is just a cutout from a very traditional P&L. And certainly everybody can say how much they are spending that is related to payroll versus tech versus programs or T&E, because that's how their charts of accounts are set up largely. And the vast majority of businesses can also slice that for each of the departmental functions, sales, marketing, CS, et cetera. But this is all structured as a way to capture costs along organizational boundaries. And it has nothing to do with capturing costs along the set of connected activities, if you will, that are cross-departmental, but which add up to create customers and to create revenue. So the title of our webinar was How to Set Up Your Chart of Accounts to Measure Go-to-Market ROI. Obviously, making wholesale changes to your chart of accounts is likely not practical, as it would impact your historical financial reporting. So what we're going to try to help you with today is a way to think about improving your ability to capture go-to-market ROI sufficiently well in order to improve the decisions you make on those investment allocations. So a common problem we see when leadership teams can't answer the questions they need to be able to answer is that they make decisions based on the questions they can answer. For example, let's say we're spending a fair amount of marketing program dollars in both paid search and paid LinkedIn advertising. I'd like to know, is one of them more effective than the other? So I could overweight my spend allocation to the one that's more effective. So the question I need to be able to answer is, what is the relative ROI of paid search versus paid LinkedIn? Well, my company hasn't really set ourselves up to be able to calculate that, so I can't actually really answer that question. But what I can answer fairly easily is the relative cost per lead. And I see that the cost per lead for LinkedIn is about half of what the cost per lead for paid search is. So I decide, okay, I'm going to move money from paid search and move it to LinkedIn because we have a much better cost per lead. Well, guess what? Cost per lead is not the same as ROI. In fact, it isn't even a good proxy for channel level ROI. So I'm not actually answering the question I need to answer. And in many cases, if I act on the question I can answer rather than the question I need to answer, I'll make some bad decisions. And I'll show you how that happens in the next slide.
Yeah, let's just pause here just for a second, Scott. And we talked earlier about, we'd love to find out from our audience who's joining us today, what's your level of ability to track and measure spend ROI on go-to-market spend now? Just drop in the chat. I don't have a poll because I mostly wanted to get an open-ended feedback, but what's your level of ability to track our ROI on go-to-market spend? If you are here representing, if you're an agency or a consultant shop on this call today, just share how well your clients are generally. We'd just love to get a feel for how much of a pain point this is, and those of you who out there are actually really good at this, we'd love to hear from you as well. So drop those in the chat. Scott, we can keep rolling, but let's hit the next slide here. I think you're going to walk through an example.
Yeah. So let's look a little deeper at this, right? This whole issue of answering the right question of ROI versus something else like maybe cost per lead. In this simplified example, we're investing $10K per month between agency and media spend in both paid search and paid LinkedIn. Our cost per lead, Dan, click, for LinkedIn is $2, and it's $4 for paid search, right? Twice the cost of LinkedIn. And as a result, we're generating 5,000 leads from LinkedIn and only 2,500 from search. It sure feels like LinkedIn is a better channel for us, right? But we're not even looking at half of the picture yet. We're only looking at the top of funnel to this point. Now let's consider middle of funnel to be that set of activities that are required to turn these leads into legitimate pipeline opportunities. And the first part of that is the effort to get an intro discovery call scheduled with the prospect. Now, we happen to know that an SDR spends on average 15 minutes per lead trying to get that lead into a scheduled discovery meeting. So that's 1,250 SDR hours to work those LinkedIn leads, compared to 625 SDR hours to work the paid search leads, simply because there was half as many leads. And at $40 an hour for SDR base, that's $50,000 of SDR cost against LinkedIn compared to $25,000 against search. The next step in the middle of funnel is actually to prepare for and conduct that intro discovery meeting and then convert qualified prospects into legitimate pipeline opportunities. And in our example, this work is done by an AE. Now we know that an AE, spends on average 45 minutes preparing for a meeting, maybe 45 minutes in the actual meeting time for those who show, and probably 15 minutes waiting on Zoom for folks who ultimately ghost and don't show. When you add all that up, that's 2,000 AE middle of funnel hours for LinkedIn compared to 1,400 for search. And at $60 an hour base for AE, that's $120,000 in AE cost just for middle of funnel for LinkedIn compared to $84,000 for AE middle of funnel on search. And finally, there's bottom of funnel, where an AE progresses the ops through the pipeline to a point of closure, hopefully close one. Now, we know that it takes roughly 20 hours of AE time on average to move a LinkedIn pipeline op to a deal compared to 18 hours to do the same thing for a paid search op. That adds to 2,800 AE bottom of funnel hours on LinkedIn compared to 2,700 for search. Again, at $60 an hour, plus let's call it a 10% commission rate, that adds up to $308,000 of bottom of funnel AE costs for LinkedIn compared to $312 for search. So if you add all that up on both columns, the total investment for LinkedIn is $488,000 compared to $431 for search. So consequently, we got a 2.87x ARR return on investment from LinkedIn, which is meaningfully less than the 3.48x ARR return for search. So this is exactly the point I'm trying to make. If you want to make a decision on channel or on geos or segments, you need to ask yourself what the relative ROI is, and you need to be able to answer it. Asking yourself the relative cost per lead would actually lead you to make a bad decision here and overinvest in LinkedIn. You've got to answer the right questions. So how do we go about doing that? If you remember, there were kind of two elements in that example I just walked through to arrive at ROI by channel. The first element was full funnel analytics. In this case, attributed one full funnel to LinkedIn advertising and the other to paid search advertising. And this is what we typically call channels or sourcing strategies. And you may have noticed when I walked through the example that I said, we know how many hours an SDR spends to convert a lead. Next slide, Dan. Spends to convert a lead to a meeting set, or an AE spends to convert pipeline opportunities to a deal. We know that because of activity-based costing. And in a little bit, we'll show you how to apply activity-based costing in your business. So with these two tools, full funnel analytics and activity-based costing, together they basically arm you to understand go-to-market ROI and drive much more efficient growth. So let's dig a little deeper into full funnel analytics. So full funnel analytics is achieved by connecting the data that's produced by instrumenting the top of funnel activities, the middle of funnel activities, and the bottom of funnel activities. But by connecting all that data into a holistic picture of the process of acquiring customers, and then tagging that funnel data with attributes that are important to your business, such as sourcing channel, which is particularly important if your business invests in multiple channels and you want to make sure you're putting money into the better ones. Other companies may, slice this by industry vertical or some other segmentation. This is an example of full funnel analytics by channel. Of course, to get this, you need to have a point of view about top of funnel attribution. And a lot of people get wrapped around the axle over attribution. But if you think back to the example we went through with those two funnels, roughly 97% of the cost incurred was middle of funnel and bottom of funnel. Right? It was basically when all the SDR and AEs had to start doing activities that the cost of the channel really exploded. And so our whole point of view is that we want to attribute the cycle, the sales cycle for any given lead or pipeline opportunity to the activity that kicked off that most recent engagement from expensive SDR and AE resources. So, for example, let's say someone came to your trade show booth 5 years ago, and you captured them as a lead and maybe even gotten early into an opportunity stage, and then it never went anywhere, right? Now, more recently, they clicked on a LinkedIn ad, and they have now entered a new sales cycle. Well, we would clearly attribute this new sales cycle to LinkedIn, as that was the trigger that caused the current investment in SDR and AE activities to begin. But we would keep history of the original cycle that was driven by a trade show. And so we call this attribution technique multi-cycle attribution, but we're really focused on trying to tie to the triggering event that causes SDRs and sales to get involved, because that's when all the expense starts being incurred. So this is another example of full funnel analytics, only this time it's sliced by sizing segmentation of SMB versus mid-market versus emerging enterprise versus enterprise. So again, I'm just giving you examples of full funnel analytics because it's one of the required tools to be able to get go-to-market ROI. Many companies struggle to achieve useful full funnel analytics because it requires really a lot of expertise and considerable thought into how to instrument the tech stack and implement appropriate data hygiene tools in order to get all this stuff right. And for what it's worth, this is the type of work that we do, Scale Matters does for our customers. So if your company does need help in that regard, feel free to reach out. Let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about activity-based costing. Some of you, particularly who've taken accounting classes, may remember activity-based costing from your days learning cost accounting back in school. It is a technique to apply overhead and indirect costs into cost of goods sold, predominantly in manufacturing companies. And it does that by basically assigning the cost of each activity to all products or services according to the actual consumption of those activities by each product or service. And we can use this exact same approach in order to sufficiently assign the costs of SDR and AE activities to the middle and bottom of funnels by looking at the activities they perform during each of these funnel stages. And when you think about funnels, one important part of funnels are conversion rates. Well, conversion rates are what basically dictate the consumption of these activities for each specific funnel. So let's get a little deeper on this, and we'll look at an example with the SDRs. So if we go back and consider that prior example of the two funnels, the activities done by SDRs are in the middle of the funnel. Basically, the SDR responsibility here is to chase down incoming leads and try to get them scheduled and committed to an initial discovery and qualification call. This typically involves just a bunch of outreach, right? Calling, emailing, sending LinkedIn messages to these people that are behind the leads to try to get them scheduled and committed to taking a discovery or qualification meeting. So how do we actually assign a cost to these SDR outreach activities? Well, since we've properly instrumented our environment to capture these activities, we know from this first chart that on average an SDR can execute 560 outreach activities per month. This second chart is an excerpt from what we call a funnel journey map, where we capture every detailed step along the lead to deal journey for each channel. And in this case, we can see for this channel funnel that it has consumed 6,373 outreach activities in order to turn the leads into meetings set. So dividing 6,373 by the 560 average per month for SDR, that basically equates to 11.4 SDR staff months invested in this channel in the middle of funnel. And at $80K per year for the average SDR, If you take 11.4 staff months, that equates to about 76K, again, which we apply as the SDR middle of funnel costs for this funnel. Now, again, you can only do this if you've gone through the work to properly instrument your environment in order to capture these detailed full funnel analytics. But the value in doing so is extraordinary, because that's what enables you to dramatically improve your efficiency by driving up the ROI on your overall go-to-market spend. So now let's turn to the AEs, and let's look at the activities executed by the AEs. In our example, the AE owns the initial discovery and qualification meeting part of middle of funnel. This means some time spent prepping for the meetings, time spent in the meetings themselves, but also some time spent, as I said before, waiting on Zoom for meetings when the prospect doesn't even show up. But the AE also owns the entire bottom of funnel, where they are expected to go through the various steps of the sales process to move an opportunity through the pipeline in order to become a closed-won deal. And this would include activities like, conducting demos, building and negotiating proposals, coordinating security reviews, maybe pilots, right, and so on. Now, to assign cost to the AE activities, we use a model we've developed here. We call it our rep capacity model, which is really a tool that we developed to help our customers better understand how many sales reps they actually need in order to meet bookings targets. In this excerpt from the model, you can see that we break down, what we're doing here is we basically break down the sales process into each activity in each stage. And in this particular customer, where there's 7 stages of pipeline, in the first stage, which is called discovery, basically the activities that take place are prepping and executing a discovery call, and also time spent on emails and calls coordinating next steps. What we're basically saying is we know that on average, the AE will spend about 10 minutes coordinating over email. So that's 0.17 hours. And about 1 hour, go back, please. And about 1 hour prepping for and then conducting the discovery meeting, for a total of 70 minutes or 1.17 hours for each opportunity in stage 1. Now, next, what we do is we invert the conversion rates to determine how many opportunities the AE must execute in any given stage in order to get a deal. And in this case, since the overall win rate is 20%, that means that we need 5 opportunities to go through the discovery call, basically stage 1, to ultimately yield 1 deal. So what you see in the bottom row in that S1 column is we're taking the 1.17 for 1 opportunity times 5 to arrive at a total of 5.8 hours consumed at this stage. And if we repeat this process across all stages, in this example, what it yields is an average of 25.9 AE hours consumed per deal. Now, if we assume, 120K base for the AE, this yields roughly $1,500 in base allocated per deal, plus, of course, the commission earnings. So this is how we're doing this activity-based costing again. So as a reminder, we're wrapping up here, efficient growth matters, particularly for those of you who are in finance. You're probably getting more pressure to help drive this efficient growth than most functions. And you can't get there without go-to-market efficiency. And to achieve that, you need to be able to answer the right questions, which implies having a detailed understanding of go-to-market ROI, so you know which investments are productive and which are not. So hopefully you found the approach of using full funnel analytics together with activity-based costing to be a useful construct that you can go ahead and apply in your own business. And finally, to wrap up, I showed you a little bit of the rep capacity model that we use both for capacity planning and also for this activity-based costing. If you're interested in getting a copy of that, you can go onto our website at this link here and download that. And of course, again, soft sell for any of you that want to or need to strengthen your business's ability to drive better efficiency through better analytics. and you need help to do that, that's really what we're here for. So please reach out. Thanks again for your time. Hope you all have a good rest of your day, and happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Scott, and thanks to the folks who answered our open-ended question earlier about how you're able to measure ROI. I think Michael said marketing, sales, and CS are very separate metrics at the moment and hard to combine. Scott walked through a brief example of those metrics combined, but it really takes instrumenting your tech stack properly. And I think what you walked through, Scott, on webinar 2 about how to get your go-to-market reporting on the same level as financial reporting, that would maybe be a good resource, Michael. If you weren't able to attend that, you can watch the replay. And then Tom said, I know the money we spend, but we have very little tracking of that through closed won. So thanks for joining us, Tom, because that's exactly what we're addressing in this webinar series. And then, Scott, there was a question came in about you showed examples of doing activity-based costing for SDR and AE, but how would you do that for marketing or the top of funnel, and then also for CS, which is post-sale?
Well,
how would it differ from what you walked through?
Yeah, so in order to make the example simple for the webinar, I just assume that you're paying for an agency to do that marketing work on the paid search or paid LinkedIn. If you're doing it in-house, you do need to go through the exercise probably once or twice a year of asking the marketing people who work on that work to kind of track for a week how much time of theirs they're putting into that, right? You don't need to go to a time tracking system where you're looking at every minute everybody spends. Generally speaking, you could do this either through interviewing or asking these people to track it for a week or so, once or twice a year. But you're effectively getting, you're asking them to take their 40-hour week and chunk it into the various activities they're doing. You know what they cost, what the people cost, and then by chunking their time into the activities, you're able to understand what those activities cost. So that's how I would do it in the marketing side or the CS side.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that. And then the only other thing I wanted to bring up is if, we're 3 webinars into this series, if anyone has any feedback on the first 3 webinars, whether they've been helpful, whether they were disappointing, or anything in between, we'd love to hear your feedback. So just shoot Scott an email at scott@scalematters.com. Let us know how you've been applying the resources he's been sharing, or if these topics have not been helpful to you, let us know as well. We want to be putting these sessions on to be as helpful as possible. So we appreciate everyone coming today. Don't miss our next webinar again. Our 4th and final webinar in the series, Bridging the Gap Between Finance and Go-to-Market, is going to be on December 11th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Questions about go-to-market that CFOs need to be able to answer in 2025. Thanks for coming today, and hope to see you on the next one. And until then, happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.